The Resident is the main antagonist of our game. It is a humanoid creature that will kill the player on contact. The Resident is the only source in the game that provides a fail condition. The Resident will kill the player because it hates light and noise. The mansion is its territory. The Resident likes to be alone and it craves for food. You, the player, are entering the mansion. The player's purpose of being there is to find fuel for their car. At first, things seem mostly normal. The mansion is lit, but no one seems to be around. The player's goals are to gather items that would allow them to gather fuel. A gas can, a hose, and a funnel. The gas can is used to hold the fuel. The hose is used to siphon the fuel. The funnel is used to help with the siphoning to maximize the amount of fuel they get. You must do so with only your wits and your trusty flashlight. This mansion is expansive, over 6,000 square feet per floor. There are 3 floors, a first floor, a second floor, and a cellar. There are 10 levels that we are forming by dividing the mansion up into accessible points throughout the game. There are 3 keys to access portions of the mansion: the master bedroom key, the cellar key, and the lab key. The master bedroom key gives access to most of the second floor of the house. The cellar key gives access to the basement where the generator and the fuel in it can be found. The lab key gives access to possible escape routes for the player.
The Resident dwells inside the mansion, roaming around the dark rooms and hallways. Its hatred of light and noise causes it to become violent quickly. The Resident's movements limit the player's movement by preventing the player from moving where the Resident is, since the Resident will kill the player if they are not careful or if they get too close. The Resident's behavior is broken down into 3 main states: roaming, aggravated, and provoked. The roaming Resident will perform idle actions such as walking around an area or standing guard in one spot, and will react to loud noise or lights. If it becomes antagonized by loud noise or lights, it becomes aggravated. The player will have 1 or 2 seconds to stop aggravating the Resident before it becomes provoked and attacks the player. The provoked state is where the Resident is at its deadliest. The Resident will move faster than the player can run and will chase the player until the noise or light goes away or the player dies, whichever comes first. If the player manages to stop the light, be it an environmental light or their flashlight, from further provoking the Resident will begin to calm down again. Turning off the flashlight or flipping the light switch would be key to surviving an encounter with the Resident. The player must also stop running from the Resident and hide quietly in order to get away safely. If the Resident loses track of the player when it is provoked, it will spend a moment searching the player's last known location before returning to its roaming state and going back to its origin.
Through a first-person perspective, the player navigates the mansion by walking, crouching, interacting with the environment, and moving in a panicked state. Walking is slow, but makes very little noise. It becomes less viable when time is a factor, but is one of the safer methods of movement. Crouching allows our player to reduce their height to enable entrance through smaller openings and avoiding being seen by the Resident. By allowing our player to crouch, we offer them the ability to conceal themselves and move in more relative safety. Concealing themselves behind furniture breaks line of sight with the Resident, but also prevents them from tracking the Resident in turn. The player is also able to interact with the environment by operating switches, levers, inspecting points of interest, and opening or closing doors. Doors will be as much an obstacle to the player as they are to the Resident. Switches and levers manipulate the environment and must be utilized to solve the various puzzles around the mansion. Points of interest will hold interesting snippets of information that will either fill in the player about their surroundings or give them clues. In a panic state, the player's walking turns to running, and opening and closing doors turns to slamming doors instead. All noises given off by the player will increase. As the Resident hates noise as much as it hates light, this will run a much higher risk of offending the Resident. The panic state is meant to serve as the last line of defense against a provoked Resident, as the Resident already moves faster than the player is able to run. The player will only be able to operate in a panic state for so long. After a few seconds of panicking, they will become fatigued. Once fatigued, the player will be momentarily stunned as they catch their breath before resuming.
The mansion is filled with various objects such as furniture, switches, levers, keys, and other knickknacks. Furniture is our basic object the player cannot interact with directly, however, it can obscure the path of both the player and the Resident. Doors come in a variety of forms, such as locked doors, alternating doors, timed doors, and your good old average door. The regular and locked doors open up, just as any door should, using the action button to open them. Locked doors, however, will only open as long as the player has the proper key in their inventory. Alternating and timed doors do not open in the same fashion as they require either a switch or a lever. Alternating doors specifically use a lever to move from one position to the other. When moving, they block the previous path and open a new path for the player to go down. If the lever is flipped again, the door will return to its original position, reopening the previous path and closing the new path. Time doors open only by the press of a switch. The door will remain open for a period of time and then close after that time, resetting the switch. It's important to know the difference between our switches and levers. Levers can be used indefinitely. When using a lever, it'll alter the environment based on alternating doors or just moving some objects around, such as furniture. However, a switch can only be used once. The only rule to this is if the puzzle resets for any reason, such as a time door returning to its original location, can that switch be used again. We also have one last area of the game that I'd like to discuss, which is the points of interest. These are areas or objects that the player can interact with using the action button that display a text for the player to read and further understand concepts of the game that are not otherwise in it, such as hints to puzzles, keys to the story, or just general information about the game.
The player has a flashlight with them at all times. The flashlight illuminates the player's path so that they can navigate the dark areas throughout the game. Certain objects react to the flashlight in different ways in the game. Points of interest, inventory objects, switches, and levers glow when the light shines on them. The resident becomes aggravated and then provoked when the flashlight is on it, hissing and charging the player in an attempt to eviscerate them. The player will not only have a moment to turn off the light before the resident is provoked, they will also hear the resident any time it is nearby. Some objects open up or change states when the light is on it. A morning glory flower will blossom and follow the light if it shines on it. When the player first comes across the new control feature, and it is the first time it is being introduced to the player, a pop-up will show up saying to press the button on the keyboard. The game is primarily HUD-less, with only the message pop-ups, the fatigue vision, and the inventory showing up on screen. The Resident is a dark, non-combat survival horror game. Thank you for watching our presentation. Do you have any questions?